And we're back with part 2 of my season 1 rewrite. If you've not already seen part 1, definitely go and check that out, because I'm going to be referencing it a whole bunch and you're just going to be really confused as to what the hell I'm talking about. But for anyone that has seen it, I'll just do a quick little refresher of our overall objectives. So we're going to make it a new jumping on point, make characterization the priority, establish the show's formula, add some more episodes and reshuffle the order. Now this is the series order as we have it. Last time we were concentrating on the first 5 episodes up to Dot and Bubble. This time round we're going to be looking at episodes 6 to 8, Devil's Chord, Rogue and 73 Yards, just because I wanted to look at these a little bit more in depth, and the same for the finale. But without further ado, let's get stuck in. Now with this one, I really love the concept and all the pieces are there, but I feel like it doesn't quite stick the landing when it comes to the execution. But let's see if we can change that. Our objectives for this: we're going to tweak Maestro's plan, so we're going to have them just feed on music and all of its creative potential, whilst also having control over it. We're going to put more emphasis on the Beatles' impact on music and culture in general. We're not necessarily including them any more or less, and still no Beatles music, but we're going to focus more on the impact of the Beatles music not existing, rather than just all music is bad now. I know this is going to draw comparisons to the Danny Boyle film Yesterday, but we'll just have to make sure that we've got enough Doctor Who-iness in there so that it doesn't feel like a rip-off. We're going to move the big musical number and also change it from There's Always a Twist at the End, because I don't like it, sorry. We're going to change the Deus Ex Beatles ending. It's a little bit too contrived that John and Paul just happen to be there, and in our version we're going to give the Doctor and Ruby more of a role in actually defeating Maestro. Finally, don't reference previous stories too much. We can have references in there, but let's not rely on them. So we're starting with a slightly tweaked opening. Still beginning in 1925 and the piano lesson, so we can have all of that exposition of the tritone, the Devil's Chord. Although I do think there's a slight contrivance in Maestro being summoned with this chord, in that this would imply that no one has ever played a tritone before, otherwise surely this would have summoned Maestro. To stray into music nerd territory here for a second. By the way, this show reminder to go check out my series where I analyse some of Murray Gold's character themes for the show. The tritone, whilst not incredibly common, crops up a decent amount in music history. In classical music, musical theatre,
Maria,
rock, metal, pop, and even TV and movie themes. The Beatles themselves even used it a couple of times too. Also, the whole thing about the tritone interval being banned by the Catholic Church because it was associated with the devil, that's a myth. But why should we let that get in the way of a fun Doctor Who story, right? But my headcanon, which probably wouldn't make it into the script because it's a little bit too over expository, is that the piano that they're playing on is the iconic Mrs. Mills piano, which would later be one of the pianos at Abbey Road Studios that featured on several of the Beatles' biggest hits. And because of this musical cultural significance, it has certain magical properties that allow Maestro to use it as a gateway to our dimension when the Devil's Chord is played on it. I'm fully aware that this is a tiny and very unnecessary addition from me, but I think it's just easier to believe that this forbidden chord has never been played on this specific piano, at this point only 20 years old, rather than on any piano in the world before 1925, because it just had. Anyway, back to the actual story. Maestro gets summoned with the chord, goes to feed on the teacher, makes a remark about how he used to have a spark, but he's lost it. All of that creativity and passion is dead, but he'll do for a light snack to tide them over, and then consumes him. We're going to cut the Harbinger stuff because that doesn't really go anywhere. Just have the kid run away. Then Maestro climbs back into the piano. Let's find something more tasty. 1963. The Beatles are rehearsing in the studio. Behind them, Maestro climbs out of a piano at the back of the room. Hello, boys. Who are you? Sorry, love, this is a private session. Oh, look at you all. In your matching suits. Don't you look just delicious. Look, you're gonna have to... That's enough from you, drummer boy. Maestro gestures flippantly with their hand in his direction, and Ringo is hovering a few inches off the ground, paralysed. His arms fixed to his side, head fixed up, full of tension. Like an invisible fist has him in its grasp and is squeezing him tight. The rest of the band immediately rush to try and help. Maestro repeats the gesture. John, Paul and George are lifted from the ground and join Ringo in a neat line, all paralysed, terrified. What have you done to us? Maestro strolls towards them, parading through the room between the bodies, touching their shoulders and stroking their cheeks as they move, a predator stalking their prey. Oh, darling, don't you worry your pretty little head. Let us go. Hell, she's gonna kill us. No, I'm not gonna kill you. What a waste that'd be. I just need your souls. All those melodies and songs and that sweet, sweet rock and roll. Maestro holds up their conductor's baton, poised. Oh, I bet you taste so good. Maestro lifts the baton, then brings it down, as if conducting the first beat of a symphony. Wide shot, chaotic shadows on the wall, flailing, screams of the band. Maestro laughs maniacally, instruments crashing, cacophony of sound, tiny fragments of Beatles songs, musical notes flying, zipping around, all crescendoing, and then... nothing. The shadows disappear. Silence. Maestro slowly walks back towards the piano and takes their seat on the stool. Now then, boys. They address where the band was positioned, but there's no one there, just their instruments, guitars on the floor and a drum kit, half of which has fallen over, a panning shot along the neck of one of the guitars, and then, through the sound hole reaching up, a hand, fingers outstretched pushing between the strings. One of the drum skins begins contorting, as if something is pushing up from underneath, inside it, a face, screaming. Sing along if you know this one. Maestro's head snaps to look at the camera. With one finger, Maestro plays the bass line of the Doctor Who theme tune into titles. We're going to fix the piano going into the title sequence and then it coming out of the jukebox. I really love the idea. I mean, how are you going to resist doing that in an episode like this? But it just needs tightening up a little bit for the full effect. I know that's not a script thing, but you know. We're going to keep the whole sequence of Ruby asking to see the Beatles recording, her and the Doctor getting dressed up, and the dance across Abbey Road, but maybe just have them both wearing something that's more overtly non-60s to start with, so there's a bit more of the contrast between the two costumes. Also keep them sneaking into the studios with the tea cart, that's a fun little idea, but when they offer George Martin a cup of tea, we see him frustrated, a little stressy, sat alone. Morning, cup of tea. Yeah, make it strong, 2 sugars. Do you think the boys will want anything? Which boys are they then? Ruby and the Doctor look through the glass into the sound booth to see... Oh. It's empty. Oh, sorry, I must have the wrong room. Do you know which studio the Beatles are recording in? The Who? No, the Beatles. Never heard of them, sweetheart. Sorry. Sorry, you are George Martin, aren't you? That's me, yes. And you've never heard of the Beatles? I can't know every band in the country, can I? It can't be that big. Oh, come on. I know it's still the early days, but how do you work in Abbey Road and not know the Beatles? That was George Martin. He produced nearly everything the Beatles did. He's the 5th Beatle. But he don't even know who they are. Something's wrong. What kind of wrong? Kind I don't like. Kind we're gonna fix. Keep the cafeteria scene, but obviously we've got no scenes with John or Paul. Instead, the Doctor and Ruby ask people in there about the band, but nobody has any idea who they're talking about. We're going to add a scene of the Doctor considering how important the Beatles are to popular music, and how important music is to people, to history, and what happens if that changes. Ruby notes how dreary and dull the cafeteria seems, and the Doctor wonders about the lack of music, no one humming or whistling. He whistles a tune. Everyone turns to look at him, and the spoon is dropped. Maestro's reflection appears in various objects. He picks up the spoon, seeing Maestro grimacing. Then everything snaps back to normal. He and Ruby look at each other. What the hell was that? Straight to the roof, where we shorten the Susan discussion. I live over there. You do what? Shoreditch, in my past. But right now, in 1963, I live in a junkyard on Totters Lane with my granddaughter Susan. Okay? You've got a granddaughter. Ow. I mean, today, back in my time, where is she? I don't know. How can you not know? All my people are dead. The genocide, maybe it killed her too. Doctor? God. She pulls him into a big hug. The doctor chuckles softly, hugging her back. He smiles a sad smile, looking out over the skyline to Totters Lane. One thing we're definitely going to keep is Ruby playing piano. That is a gorgeous sequence. We're also going to have Maestro climbing out of the piano and the doctor running from the giggle. That's a really great moment too. We're going to get rid of Ruby telling the doctor, "You never hide." That feels a bit on the nose, but we can still communicate her being confused or afraid of such a reaction from the doctor. Instead, change it for something like, "Doctor, what is it? What's wrong?" You know, you can still have that urgency and that panic without telling us, "You never hide, you never run away." Doesn't feel natural. Keep all of the stuff of Maestro on the prowl and the doctor using the sonic to silence everything. That's a really great, tense moment. We're just going to add a couple of quick little lines to explain what he did afterwards. Keep the June Hudson scene, that's a nice little cameo and also ups the threat. And also the whole "I don't know what to do" scene with some alterations. A big one is that we're cutting the line referencing the doctor telling Ruby about the toy maker, because this didn't make it into the finished cut of The Church on Ruby Road, so it makes no sense for it to be here. What did you do? Inverted the frequency of all sound waves within a 100-meter radius. Finally the screwdriver does something sonic. Okay, great, so we can do that again. One trick, once. That's all you get with the gods. That thing must be a part of the Pantheon. My legions are coming. You're scaring me now. Oh, Ruby. There are vast powers beyond the universe. One of them fell to Earth, and defeating him took everything. It ripped me in half. It literally tore my soul in half. But you survived. I can't survive it again.
Ruby crouches down next to him and puts a hand on his shoulder, resting her head against his. They sit there for a moment. Then he stands, recovering, still shaken.
Okay, so we find it. We work out what it's done and how, and then we stop it. I don't know what to do. Of course you do. You'll figure it out. No, Ruby, I don't. I don't know. Last time I got lucky. But this thing, it has some kind of power over music. I don't know what for, but it's already taken out the biggest band in history, and I don't think it's going to stop there. I'm sorry. But the power of these creatures is so vast, the whole world could slide into the pit. Doctor, I know you're clever and all that, but I've got news for you. The world did not end in 1963. And the Beatles existed because I remember them. Come with me. From here, the Doctor takes her to see the potential future if they don't stop Maestro. But we're definitely cutting the whole 6 months line. I know Russell has explained that this line isn't explaining a time jump, and that it was intended as a reference to your sense of time being out of whack when travelling in the TARDIS, and a cheeky reference to the unit dating controversy, but I think the fact that everyone interpreted it as there being a massive 6-month time jump means we need to cut that. As mentioned up top, we're also changing Maestro's motivation. So in the original, Maestro wants to create these Aeolian tones and feed off every song that goes unsung, until they can eventually feed off the music of the spheres, killing the universe. Instead, we're going to have Maestro feed on the music. The desire isn't to get rid of all music, it's to feed on all of that musical energy or genius, talent and potential inside musicians. Why should the world have the Beatles when they can have them all to themselves, feeding on their music for eternity? Maestro starts bending reality and taking them back to the 60s with a song. The Doctor asks how they're doing this, and they explain that a good song can take you back in time. It's a cheeky little idea, I know, but it links to the whole memory as time travel concept that crops up in the finale, which I'm going to make a bit more of. This is when we have the musical number, not the twist at the end. We're in one of the big studio halls with Maestro puppeteering random people to perform a big show tune, surrounding the Doctor and Ruby as they try to get back to the TARDIS to escape, with the performers blocking their way. Make it a really big, fun set piece and go all out with the musical influences. Just as the Doctor thinks that they've broken through the crowd and got to the TARDIS, he feels someone grab his arm. He turns. It's Ruby, and she's singing now too, dragging him back into the crowd. And soon the Doctor is also under Maestro's influence, singing and dancing away. The TARDIS makes that groaning sound and breaks the spell for the Doctor. He quickly uses the sonic to cause some loud whining feedback from a nearby guitar amp, snapping everybody out of it. He grabs Ruby's hand and they run back into the TARDIS, with the dancers falling unconscious, dropping like flies around them. Maestro watches on, snarling. From here we go into the Doctor's plan to go and find the right chord and record it on the sonic. But we're going to add a fun little exchange in there. John Lennon's guitar, that's got to be a good start. But don't you need to be a genius? No offence, I mean a musical genius. Can you even play a guitar? Of course I can play guitar. But I could play guitar. I mean, I have played. Or was that the bassoon? Let me do it. See if you can find a piano. Wait a minute, can you hear that? We're keeping Ruby being dragged away by the staves and the non-diegetic gag. I really like it. And then that gorgeous image of Ruby suspended in the air with the staves wrapped around her. That's just beautiful. We still have the Carol of the Bells moment. We get the snow here because of the song linked to memory concept. And we have Maestro say that this is the song inside Ruby's soul. Keep the Doctor's little monologue about the Mrs. Mills piano. Maybe just add a line referencing that this is how Maestro entered this realm, just because of what we mentioned earlier, the tritone, musical potential, all of that business. Then, the music battle. The Doctor and Maestro are locked in their music battle, fiercely playing. Musical notes fly up from their instruments and whiz around, crashing into their opponents. They seem evenly matched until Ruby joins the Doctor. She plays alongside him, a duet, a team. Their music swells up around them. Maestro begins to falter. Some of the musical notes from the piano whiz past Maestro and toward an acoustic guitar propped up idly in the room. The notes scuff and scratch at the varnished wood of the guitar, then one smashes through it. And out crawls John Lennon. Maestro is caught off guard for a second, turning around and missing a beat. No! Another sequence of notes fly past, bumping their shoulder and cracking two other guitars open, freeing Paul and George. Another tears the skin of a drum, which falls down and out tumbles Ringo. Maestro's power is visibly weakening. Ruby continues playing as the Doctor runs over to help the Beatles to their feet. Gentlemen, I haven't got time to explain, but I need you to play. The music battle continues with the Doctor, Ruby and the Beatles teaming up to take down Maestro, weakening them with their music. Then the Doctor realises what the chord must be. Ruby! A tritone! What? That's the chord! Banish them! The band's playing crescendos before stopping for Ruby. With one strong push down on the keys, she plays the discordant notes, and they reverberate around the room. Maestro lets out an operatic shriek of agony, which is quickly silenced, as if the music is being pulled out of them. The piano spins around to face Maestro's direction, and the top lid opens like a mouth, and the staves are now physical ropes, pulling Maestro in. They scramble across the floor, scraping their fingernails across the floorboards. No! The Doctor lets out a triumphant hoot. Oh ho ho! Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, please allow me to introduce you to your new favourite band. Live from Abbey Road Studios, it's Ruby Sunday and the Beatles. Maestro's body is pulled inside the piano. The others watch on, half in relief, half in horror. The Doctor swaggers up to the piano, confident in his victory, mocking Maestro's defeat. Hello, goodbye. Maestro, desperately clutching onto the frame of the piano. holding themselves up from being swallowed by it just long enough to say, "The one who waits is almost here." A moment of silence, everyone staring at the piano in disbelief. Then, "I don't know about anyone else, but I could do with a drink." The doctor runs over to Ruby, still stood behind the piano, and wraps his arms around her in a big hug. She squeezes him tightly. "Oh, Ruby Sunday, you are amazing." "Good old Mrs. Hampton, eh?" "Mrs. Hampton?" "The first piano teacher. It had a guts boring as anything, smelt of old lavender. But the one thing I do remember from her, the devil's chord." Ruby plays the first note on the piano, reaching for the second. The doctor slams the floorboard down. "Ow!" "Better not." As part of the denouement, we have a conversation between Ruby and John, where he recognises the spirit of a musician in her, and the sense of yearning that she has. "You can tell that you're a musician, you know, girl." "Me? No, I mean, I play a bit, but I'm not a musician." "Of course you are. I can see it in you. You've got music in your soul." The doctor's ears prick up. "Music is everything. It's love, and joy, and heartbreak, and grief. It's life. Never let that go, Ruby." Ruby smiles. "I won't." "Hey, Ruby, don't suppose you're any good on the drums? We're looking for a replacement." "Get out of it." They laugh as they enter back into the studio. The doctor and Ruby go to leave. "Ruby," she turns. "I hope you find it." "Find what?" "Whatever it is you're looking for." He gives her a warm smile and walks to join the rest of the band. Close on Ruby, in thought. As John exits, he half sings a tune. "Ruby in the dead of time." On the doctor and Ruby, eyes wide. Did he just... They turn to look at each other, then back at the door. The doctor and Ruby walk back across the zebra crossing to the TARDIS. "So, not a bad day then?" "What, you mean apart from the god of music trying to kill us and destroy the universe?" "Humans always find something to moan about." Ruby gives him a playful smack on the arm. He smiles. "You okay though?" "I'm okay. I just got to meet the Beatles." "And play with them?" "At Abbey Road." They dance excitedly like two school children. "Ah, oh, what a day." "Did we just save music?" "You know what, Rubes? I think we did." They laugh. "And what greater cause is there? Like your mate John said, music is everything." And that, right there, is what it's all about. Collaboration. Sharing ideas and feeling through a universal shared language. It's beautiful. Sometimes all you need is a little help from your friends. I can't believe you just did that. Sometimes you've just got to come together. Right, that's it, I'm off. "Ruby, come back. I want to hold your hand." "Not funny. Let's go across the universe." "Alright, you need to let it be." Oh, yes, go. And that would be the end of The Devil's Chord. So, on to the next one. Episode 7, Rogue. Honestly, this is one of my favourites from the season, along with Boom. I think it just needs some tweaks here and there to tighten it up a little, and then we've got ourselves a genuinely great episode. But all of the elements are already there. So our objectives. Don't streamline the Dr. Rogue romance too much. Rogue sacrifice should feel more of a what could have been than the Doctor losing someone really important to him, given that they've only known each other for a few hours. Really play into the fun villains. A great idea for a monster, so just have some more fun with that whole concept. Give Ruby a bit more to do. She kind of gets sidelined for the Doctor and Rogue, and whilst that should definitely be the main plot, I think we can just make a little bit more of the scenes that she's in. Reel back on some of the Bridgerton references. A couple of times is cute, but I think the script maybe overplays this beat a little. And finally, use the ending to explore the Doctor's flaws. I think this is already hinted at in the script, but we're going to make it a little more substantial and use it as a jumping off point for a little bit more Doctor and Ruby conflict. So we're going to keep basically all of the first 10 minutes. The cold open in particular is great. It has real RTD1 feel to it in the best way possible. And I also really love Ruby and the Doctor's excitement at just being in this environment. We're not going to have Ruby explicitly acknowledge the Susan Twist portrait. Maybe just have her do a bit of a double take, and then she gets distracted by Barton and Emily's argument from across the hall. Again, just so it doesn't feel too signposted. A question: do Emily and Barton know that each other are Childer? Obviously the Barton Childer is disguised as Lord Galpin in the cold open, so we can assume that any previous interactions that Emily's had with Barton was the actual human Barton. And we don't know when Emily's form was stolen. It's established that it's before the events of the episode, but that's not to say that the Barton Childer is aware of this. In which case, it's entirely possible that neither of these two know that the other isn't human. But I think to make a bit more sense of this, the two do know that the other is a member of their race, and they're just being in character and reenacting this drama. It'd be fun to have them not know and then have a moment where they discover that it's another Childer that they're talking to. Maybe they find out when one of them goes to steal the other's form or something like that. The only issue with this is that it would ruin the reveal that there's more than one Childer knocking about. I know this is kind of evident in the actual episode when we get to a certain point, but more on that in a moment. I like the idea of Rogue being this lone bounty hunter, supposedly just being in it for the money because he's kind of disillusioned with life. But when he meets the Doctor and forms some kind of connection, he acts on his morals. It's a classic arc and a little bit cliche, but I think it works here. We may just need to make it a little bit more explicit in the text. However, I think we also need a moment where the Doctor condemns the fact that Rogue kills his targets, rather than just capturing them. Because it does feel a little bit out of character that he would find that
so cool.
It also just creates a little bit more actual conflict between them, which makes the whole dynamic more interesting. You're a bounty hunter. That is so cool. Catching monsters, getting into scrapes, meeting handsome strangers. I'm here for the money, nothing more. And I don't catch monsters, I kill them. And you're not a bounty hunter. You're a hitman. Call it what you like. It pays. Oh, he's tough. Isn't he tough? Rogue stops and turns to the Doctor sternly. Listen, you've lost. Don't think that just because you're pretty, I'm going to change my mind. I know what you really are. And I know what you were doing here. And now you face your punishment. Now walk. I'm not who you look. Shut up. The Doctor continues walking in silence, rolling his eyes. Then something occurs to him. He mouths the word. Pretty. A smug grin. I also like how this would kind of make the Doctor a bit of a hypocrite later on when he revels in the idea of the Childer's suffering. I really love the scene of all the Doctor's faces showing up. It's a cool moment, but it doesn't quite work with what it's trying to do. If Rogue believes the Doctor is a Childer and has evidence that he is a shapeshifter, why would showing him all of his previous forms change his mind and not just confirm those suspicions? That doesn't make any sense. I think we need something more here, even if it's just a deep scan revealing that he's a Time Lord or that he has two hearts, but definitely keep the moment. It's cool, it's nice. Make a bit more of the scene when Ruby finds the body, both in the lead up. The whole thing of her encouraging Emily towards a more feminist way of life is great. And when she actually sees the body of the housekeeper, I think we can have her making a few deductions. Show that she's been travelling for a while now, and her evolution since seeing her first dead body in episode 3. It also gives Emily a bit more of an idea of Ruby's character and what she gets up to, which gives her more of a reason to want to play her. I know this one's been pointed out by a few people, and it does feel like a bit of a, actually, criticism, but it's one that's so easily fixed. What the Childer are doing is LARPing. It's roleplay, not cosplay. Although I really like that the concept of cosplay is something that gets referenced in the series because it's a big thing within the fandom, and it's quite cute for that to be reflected in universe. It feels like they're paying a sweet homage to nerd culture, but obviously with a fun Doctor Who twist. But change the explanation of what the Childer do to LARPing. The dance, the drama, the emotion, oh man. They're LARPing. They're what? LARPing. Live action roleplay. Ooh, check you out, Dungeons and Dragons. Hot and nerdy. There was me thinking I was the only one. It's roleplay. All of this. The Childer is playing. You said, a Childer comes to a planet, tries on people like outfits, all for the fun of it. It's wearing people's skin as cosplay. As someone that plays D&D, it feels a bit odd that Rogue struggles to improvise when the Doctor needs him to, so we're going to add a little line where he says that he doesn't do that anymore, implying that this is something he did with that person that he lost. In the script, there's a longer version of the Doctor and Rogue's performed argument, which has a great gag where Rogue panics with his improvisation and recites the lyrics of Can't Get You Out of My Head, which I really love. I think that's a fun gag. We're putting that back in. We're also going to add a quick line as Rogue catches up with the Doctor, something along the lines of, "So, how was that?" And the Doctor, obviously genuinely affected by it, tries to shrug it off. "Yeah, it was... good job." It'd be really neat if there were a way of the audience also believing that there's only one Chorder along with the Doctor and co. As it is, the fact that there are multiple Chorder is revealed pretty early on when we see the attack of the Duchess, and then consequently her talking to Barton. So it means that we're more in the know than the characters, but there's not really enough there to milk any kind of dramatic irony from that. The reveal of the Chorder family would make for a great twist and raising of the stakes as we go into the third act, whereas here it's just a spanner in the works of the Doctor and Rogue's plan. There's definitely a way of doing this, but it means we lose a couple of nice moments, so I'm going to leave it as is, but if anyone can think of a way of doing this, then drop it in the comments. The reveal of Emily being a Chorder is great, but don't lie to us with the electricity and the screaming, because it's shown that this didn't happen when we get the flashback. You can achieve pretty much the same effect by just cutting away. Same with the neck twitching and sound effects that Ruby does. Ruby hasn't seen that this is how the Chorder act, so why would she be able to replicate it? It's a shame because I really like the idea of Ruby playing the role of a Chorder as a little role reversal, but it has some holes in the logic with what we're shown, which, to be fair, aren't scripted, so I think these are maybe additions by the director. We can keep the Carla flashback now that we've actually seen her have some kind of interaction with the Doctor in our episode 3. Let's just make this an extension of that scene. This is what happened after we cut to the credits. The long time to suffer moment.
How long do they live for?
They have a lifespan of 600 years.
Good. It's a long time to suffer.
Is one of my favourite moments in the whole series, because we get to see a darker, less happy-go-lucky streak to this Doctor, which relates to his big flaw that we get to explore a bit more in this episode come the ending. I want his realisation of Ruby being dead to first be shock, turning to sadness, turning to anger. Gives Ncuti a chance to really flex his muscles here and show the darkness of that character that's still underneath that bouncy, charismatic exterior. Also, draw parallels between the villain's cosplaying history and how it's essentially what the Doctor and Ruby are doing. And you, Doctor, who has such knowledge of other worlds and times, you do not belong in this place. You wear the clothes of these people like a costume. You play at their customs simply for your own amusement. That makes you better than us. How? I haven't killed anyone. You would send us to be incinerated. No. It's even better than that. I'm going to send you to an empty little patch of space in the middle of nowhere, with nothing and no one around. It will be hell, and I will enjoy every last second of it. My only regret is that you keep this face that you stole when you murdered my friend. Once we have the reveal that this is actually the real Ruby, the Chorder don't really say or do anything, just letting the emotional beats with the Doctor, Ruby and Rogue play out. I think we can add a few lines here from the Duchess, maybe just mocking the Doctor, making snide jabs about how he goes around playing the role of the hero, and now this is where he must make his hero's sacrifice. You know, have them still kind of enjoying this drama. Then the Doctor realises that he can't lose Ruby again. He and Rogue kiss, then Rogue sacrifices himself. I really like what the final scene of this episode is going for. The Doctor's "I have to be like this because this is what I'm like." This is 15's major flaw, toxic positivity. After doing his Time Lord therapy, he believes that he is fixed and free of all that trauma. And from a certain perspective, that is true. But trauma isn't something that you can just fix and never have to worry about again. And this is where the Doctor is mistaken. There's some stuff that he has to continue to work at because he's maybe not as free from his past as he first thought. And on top of that, he definitely isn't free of new traumas, like losing Rogue and thinking that he's lost Ruby. The latter provokes a dark rage and vindictiveness in him, which he's never really shown before, and Ruby calls him out on it. Anyway, it is what it is. So, onwards, fine. Next, off we go. Where should we go? Anywhere. Doctor, you don't have to be like this. I have to be like this because this is what I'm like. Onwards, upwards, horizons keep on moving on. The way you spoke to the shoulder back there, I've never seen you like that. So angry, vicious. You scared me. I thought you were one of them. No, that's not what I mean. I was scared for you. Doctor, I know you've been through some awful, terrible things. I can't even begin to imagine. And I know it hurts, but you can't just bottle it up. You've got to let it hurt so you can heal. Because when you don't, I think tonight happens. I'm sorry. Me too. Now, shut up and come here. It's good to have you back, Ruby. You too, Doctor. And then we get our ending, with the Doctor choosing not to bottle things up, but to actually take a moment to feel what he's feeling. He takes the ring from his pocket, looks at it for a moment with a sad smile, before putting it on his finger. He looks up at the sky, a salute, a smile, and he walks on, taking a piece of Rogue with him. And there we go. That is the end of episode 7, Rogue. And with that, let's move on to the final episode of this video. Episode 8, 73 Yards. Our objectives. Make this whole story an exploration of Ruby's abandonment issues. This is a reason behind why she travels with the Doctor, leaving her friends and family before they can leave her. Integrate the plot strands. I know that a lot of people wanted the episode to be purely set inside the pub and have a sort of bottle episode base under siege format, rather than that gear shift into the political angle that we get later on. And I think a story like that would be great, but it doesn't really suit what we're trying to achieve with this, with it being somewhat of a character study for Ruby. So we are going to be keeping all of the Albion Party stuff later on, but just trying to ease the transition from the folk horror of the beginning into the personal drama of Ruby's life, into the political stuff in the back half. See if we can make it flow a little bit more. Ruby still remembers this timeline come the end. Don't undo all of that gorgeous character development. We're also going to tie it a little more closely to the finale, which you'll see what I mean when we get there. And finally, tweak the ending. I like the ambiguity, sort of. It fits with those folklore, supernatural vibes that we've got going on. But I think we need to tie up some loose ends so it feels as if the story actually resolves, rather than just getting undone and forgotten. I originally considered having this as a two-parter, but I decided that having the Doctor out of the action for 2 episodes in a row is just too much, especially after Dot and Bubble a few episodes earlier. Whilst I do think this story would probably work better as a two-parter, giving more time to properly flesh out some of its concepts and themes, and feel the Doctor's absence more, I don't think that this would have worked in this season, even if we hadn't already had a Doctor Light story, as this is Ncuti's first season as the Doctor, where we need to kind of focus on establishing him. I think if you were to make a swing as big as a 2-part Doctor Light story, then it'd have to be a season 2, maybe even season 3 story, when he's been around for a while. Ooh, you can tell I wrote this script a while ago. The closest example of this happening that I can think of is Human Nature and the Family of Blood, as it doesn't really have the Doctor in it. However, that is Tennant's 18th story and 23rd episode, and even then we're still getting Tennant, even if he is playing John Smith. With the series lengths that we get in the RTD2 era, Ncuti's 18th story would be the opener of season 3, and his 23rd episode would be episode 6 of that season. I don't know if any of that makes sense to anyone else, but basically what I'm saying is a 2-part version of this story wouldn't work in this series. Anyway, first up, an entirely superficial change. This episode doesn't feature any title sequence. Instead, the episode title and credits show up over the opening shot. I'm torn between wanting to keep this as it is, because it immediately communicates a slightly ominous, more mature tone, and shows that from the off, things are different this week. However, I do also like the idea of having the cold open of the Doctor disappearing and Ruby being left alone on the cliff, then cutting to the titles as normal, just without Ncuti Gatwa's name and only Millie Gibson's. I'm undecided as to whether this fits the tone of the episode, as it's a bit more gimmicky, but I don't know. I thought I'd mock it up anyway, because why not? Hi, editing tip here. I've had to take that mock-up of the titles out because copyright didn't like it. but I did find a cool version that somebody else did on YouTube, a similar sort of premise, so I'll link that here if you wanted to have a look and see how it might work. The Doctor's name drop of Roger William is really clunky. It needs to be here for exposition reasons, I get that, but the way it's integrated is really unnatural. Firstly, I know it's played as a gag, but why is the Doctor just like, lol, sorry, after dropping the bombshell of the possibility of nuclear war in Ruby's near future? Doesn't feel right. Also, for this moment to work, the Doctor must think that Ruby is from the time he's describing, or later, or at least have forgotten that she isn't. That's fine, but if that's the case, then why is he talking about this event like it's something that she doesn't know? It kind of all just falls apart. We'll try and work this in a little bit more naturally. Oh, I love this country. So many beautiful places and people. Honorin Bevan, Dylan Thomas, Shirley Bassey, gorgeous. Mind you, Roger William, there's a bad example of the Welsh. Horrible man. The most dangerous Prime Minister in history. Honestly, you lot were lucky to survive. Wait, what year are you from? 2024? Right. Forget I said anything. No, wait, what did he do? Tell me what happened. Oh, no. What is this? Is it just me, or does that feel a little bit less clunky than the original? You know, because he's naming famous Welsh people, gets onto Gwilliam, realises that this is her future, awkwardly backtracks, and then realises that he stepped on the fairy circle. Kind of the same, but just slightly modified. I really like the pub scene. It's a great little set piece, but I think we need a reason for the locals to be so hostile towards Ruby. I do like Ruby and the audience essentially assuming the worst and completely buying into the folk horror of it all, only to have the twist that they're just winding her up to get back at her for inadvertently stereotyping them. But she kind of doesn't. I think we need to have Ruby make some kind of like faux pas when she speaks to them, just in order to justify this. I think if you had just one character tell the story of Mad Jack, probably Dame Sian Phillips, because she's incredible. But again, this would have to be instigated by something that Ruby does. Maybe Ruby approaches her and badgers her for information about the fairy circle and the folklore around it, to which the woman starts spinning this yarn to scare her, getting more intense as she goes. It might require a bit of a change to her character, making her a little less cordial, but I think that could work. Maybe better? I don't know. That said, I am also okay with them all being pricks, if there's something to slightly justify their obvious dislike for her, other than her being a stranger and English. Apart from these two little dialogue tweaks, I want to keep basically the first half of this episode unchanged. I love the woman following Ruby over the cliffs, all of the stuff in the pub, Ruby sat outside the TARDIS talking to the Doctor, the woman following her whilst on the train, Carla's abandonment of Ruby. It's all really, really great stuff. Throughout, I want Ruby to be shown to be trying to reconnect with Carla, even as she gets older and the attempts become less frequent. Getting cut off by her mum is the most significant effect of this whole ordeal for her, and feeds into the resolution of her arc in the finale. At some point around the time of the montage of Ruby aging, I want a short scene where Cherry's death is alluded to. Maybe Ruby turns up at the funeral but is seen by Carla or someone else and has to stay away. Maybe that's a bit too dark or sad, but I don't know, it just feels real, because this would happen in 10, 20, 30 years time. I don't know, I think that could be a really strong emotional beat that really hammers home that Ruby really has no one. Originally, I was going to cut the scene with Kate and Unit and replace with a scene of her friends from the church on Ruby Road, as there isn't any personal connection for Ruby with Kate at this point. And whilst I still think we add a short scene or reference to Ruby's friends also abandoning her, I do want to keep this scene with Unit because I think it still works. As an audience, we are familiar with Kate and feel a sense of relief along with Ruby when she turns up and seems to be in control. This is set up to be the point where things get investigated, the curse is undone, and Ruby reforms her personal relationships. It also allows us to get some pretty naturally delivered exposition on the logistics of how the woman works. We get Kate's hypothesis on perception filters and how it might be linked to the TARDIS, and of course the whole 73 yards thing. This provides us with some nice characterisation for Ruby too. Despite being essentially alone for a year, she's used the time to be proactive and test the parameters of what the woman can do. measuring the distance she is away from her, attempting to get clear photographs of her face and observing how other people interact or don't interact with her. She also explains that she doesn't want to go on a boat or a plane in case that means one or both of them die. This is both a logical theory, showing her intelligence and capability even without the Doctor, but also shows her compassion. Even though she knows nothing about this woman who has completely ruined her life, she doesn't want to risk killing her. But as quickly as Kate has turned up, we get another rug pull, with her also turning on Ruby. Now she really is on her own. I just think it's a really great scene that adds a lot to the narrative and Ruby's character. Something we are going to cut is the boyfriends montage. I know it communicates that she struggles to hold down a relationship, but let's really play into the idea of her abandonment issues, and she just stops even trying to let people in. After her birth mother's abandonment of her, the Doctor, her friends, Carla and Cherry, she just doesn't even entertain the possibility of a relationship, because one day they'll just abandon her too. I saw a really great idea from the YouTuber Lasers in his Series 14 retrospective of depicting Ruby losing touch with the world and herself through her slowly losing her ability to play piano. It reinforces the musical side of her character, but also has extra meaning coming after that line at the end of our version of The Devil's Chord, where it's basically said that music is Ruby's soul, and now she's losing even that. I'll leave a link to Laser's retrospective video in the description. If you've not already seen it, go check it out. It's really good. Cut the flashbacks of the characters referencing Mad Jack. It doesn't need to be spelled out to us. I think it's interesting that this episode includes things like this to make certain things really obvious, but then has such an ambiguous ending with so many things unanswered. I don't know, that feels like a weird sense of priority, I guess. In terms of the Mad Jack link, it does feel a little shoehorned, but I like the idea that Ruby makes those connections and assumes that this is what she needs to do, like it's some kind of fate or destiny, and that maybe this will just reverse everything. In the Newsnight segment, we need to reinstate the section about the compulsory DNA testing. I honestly have no idea why the production thought cutting this would be a good idea, given how important it is later on, and we even have a flashback to it, so this definitely needs to be in there. So the whole subplot with Marty it's an interesting one. Trigger warning for this little section, I'm going to be discussing domestic violence and sexual assault. Please feel free to skip to the timecode below if you want to avoid hearing about that. Essentially, it's strongly implied that William has in some way assaulted a volunteer on his team, Marty, possibly multiple times, which is shown to have caused lasting psychological damage. My reading of this was that the abuse was sexual in nature, but I know that some people have seen it as domestic violence and physical assault or emotional manipulation, but I think more than likely a horrible combination of all three. Now, there are a whole host of different schools of thought around whether such a subject should even be covered in a family show like Doctor Who, and I completely understand that, and to a degree agree with those concerns. It's a very dark, mature and at times complex subject, and feels somewhat at odds with what this programme can actually achieve. I don't think there's anything in here that goes too far necessarily. It is all implied, and I imagine the actual specifics of what happened to Marty would largely go over kids' heads. It's also completely in character for Gwilliam, a dangerous man in power who exercises that power to get what he wants. We've seen this exact thing time and time again in the real world. In terms of the story, it characterises Gwilliam as even more of a reprehensible bastard. Just like Marty says, he's a monster. However, I think what's working against this story is the fact that the script can't properly explore this part of the narrative, and therefore the subject matter that it's portraying, as much as it feels like it wants to, and arguably should. I think this is even more apparent when you have Ruby basically acknowledging that this has taken place, but never says anything or speaks out, which feels really out of character for Ruby. She explains later that she couldn't help Marty because she had to wait for her chance to stop William from obtaining the nuclear codes. Whilst this is obviously the main focus of the story, it does have the unfortunate effect of making Ruby sound like she's giving a bigger picture argument, essentially saying, sorry, but we've got bigger problems than your assault, which really isn't a good look. Of course, I'm not trying to say that this is what Russell or anyone on the production team intended to be taken from this scene. I just think it's an unfortunate oversight. Obviously, Ruby couldn't tackle this kind of thing within an episode of Doctor Who. This show just isn't really the place to be doing that.
but given how it plays out, I do wonder if it should be here at all. I don't actually have any of the answers to this, but I'd love to know what people think. Is this too mature a subject to be tackled by Doctor Who? If you are going to discuss it in the comment section, maybe just put a trigger warning in there, just so nobody stumbles across something they'd rather not read. The resolution of the Gwillian plot, I think, is a great use of the woman, and a good resolution for that part of the narrative. It's a shame we don't get more of it, but I don't really know what else you'd be able to do with it within this episode. Cut the 40 years later title card. We can see, or at least work out, that it's been 40 years. Just cut to black and then to old Ruby. So, I think most people's issue with this story is the ending. None of this is explicitly said, but what seems to happen is this. We get old Ruby on her deathbed, and as she dies, the woman closes the distance between them, sending her back in time to when Ruby and the Doctor first step out of the TARDIS on the cliff top, implying that Ruby herself is the woman, and she's gone back to warn her younger self, so she stops the Doctor from breaking the fairy circle, and thus creating this timeline. The problem with this is that it leaves some things feeling a little messy. For example, the paradox of the older Ruby not existing to be able to warn her younger self if this timeline doesn't happen. And then there's also the question of, if Ruby doesn't go on to stop Roger William, then does he just come to power? Is that what was always meant to happen? I don't know. I know there's a lot of intentional ambiguity in this ending to tie it into the overall supernatural theme, and I really like that element. However, I think in this case, having so much go unanswered actually detracts from the story. This isn't to say that you can't have elements of ambiguity in your ending, but the story still needs to feel resolved in some way. I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here about some ambiguous endings that I feel work, just to explain why I think 73 Yards isn't quite one of those. So be aware of spoilers for the following movies. The first example that comes to mind when I think of an ambiguous ending is Christopher Nolan's Inception. The film sees Leonardo DiCaprio's Cobb leading a team of thieves who specialise in infiltrating their target's subconscious by entering their dreams. After a dangerous mission spanning several dream layers, it appears that Cobb has resurfaced in reality, and we see him happily reunite with his children. The ambiguity is propelled by the final shot of a spinning top. This is Cobb's totem, something which each member of the team has in order to help them differentiate between dream and reality. Cobb explains earlier in the film that in a dream the top will spin endlessly, but in the real world the laws of physics will apply and it will eventually topple over. The closing shot of the film pans away from Cobb and his children onto the spinning top on a table, which has the slightest of wobbles before the film cuts to black. The now iconic ending has fueled years of debate over whether or not Cobb has actually resurfaced, or if he's still inside a dream. However, the reason this ambiguity completely works for me is that it doesn't matter. From the character's perspective, he doesn't care whether this is real, because he has what he wants. The objective fact is irrelevant, because all he has is right here, right now, his subjective reality. And to this character, that holds the same amount of validity, whether it's the real world or not. Another that came to mind was 1967's The Graduate, where the two protagonists, after their big, rebellious, romantic escape to be together, are left to contemplate the logistics of what they've just done. Nothing is said, but their expressions clearly convey the fading of that initial elation as reality sets in, as they, along with the audience, wonder about how practical their happily ever after will really be. The reason this ambiguous ending works is that the uncertainty is the point. Neither we nor the characters know what is in store for them. As with the Inception example, it's a moment that is steeped in character. One that maybe links a little more closely to 73 Yards, given its supernatural themes, is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Writer Jack Torrance takes over as caretaker of the Overlook Hotel for the winter, moving in with his wife Wendy and son Danny, hoping to cure his writer's block. Unable to write, Jack uncovers dark secrets within the hotel, and begins a slow descent into madness, eventually becoming a homicidal maniac who begins terrorising his family. Come the end of the film, Jack is wielding an axe and chasing his family through a maze in the snow, but Wendy and Danny manage to escape, leaving Jack to freeze to death in the maze. The final shot reveals a photograph of Jack hanging on a wall of the hotel, among many other staff members and guests, but it's dated to 1921, suggesting that he was a part of the Overlook's history. Now there are several theories about what this actually means, Some believe that this depicts reincarnation and shows a past life of Jack's. Others think that after his death, the hotel effectively absorbs his spirit, essentially trapping him within it. Regardless of the specific explanation, the ending establishes that the supernatural forces of the hotel have the power to trap people in this endless cycle of violent madness. It suggests that what happened to Jack wasn't just a singular occurrence, and is rather just the latest instance of the Overlook's dark influence. Okay, one more for good luck. This example is from a TV series. You might have heard of it. It's called Doctor Who. 2008's Midnight, also written by Russell T Davies, has a lot of ambiguity to its story, specifically surrounding its antagonist, the Midnight entity itself. A lot of the horror in Midnight stems from the creature being so inexplicable. We're repeatedly told that it is impossible for anything to survive on the planet's surface, as it orbits a star emitting extonic radiation, which would vaporise any living creature in seconds. So when something does pop up to terrorise the tourists and crew of the Crusader 50, we know that we're in trouble, and deep in the realms of cosmic horror. It's never explained in the episode how the creature can exist in these conditions, or even if it has any kind of physical form. We don't know if it's native to the planet, if it's the only one of its kind, or what it even wants. We don't even know if it survives after being ejected from the shuttle. It is obviously later revealed in The Well that it did, but we didn't know that in 2008. There are heaps of questions surrounding the Midnight entity, but they don't need answering because the answers aren't important to the story. In fact, the ambiguity actually enhances the story. The Doctor's curiosity and need for information is what almost gets him killed, and it scares him so much that come story's end, he is more than happy to not pry for any answers and just walk away, because he's been afforded a second chance to even do so. This works because the story itself still gets resolved. The creature is defeated, sort of, the Doctor lives to fight another day, and the events have clear ramifications for all of our characters. So, how do we end 73 Yards while still keeping the essence of that supernatural ambiguity? When the episode first broadcast, my friend and podcast co-host Kat, go listen to the Sesu podcast, posted a Twitter thread on her interpretation of the story. She explains that the woman is actually a manifestation of Ruby's fears of abandonment. When Ruby reads the messages left in the fairy circle, the curse attaches itself to her, becoming a physical embodiment of her fear. As the Doctor is the one who breaks the circle, he disappears and is thus the first to abandon her. Ruby's fears of abandonment are ever present and always lingering in all aspects of her life, and are particularly relevant when concerning her close family and friends, all of which are removed from her life, leaving her alone, just as she was when she was a baby. As time passes, the woman becomes the only true constant in her life, and in her fight against William, Ruby even begins to accept her, no longer being fearful and instead adapting, taking ownership of her fear, and therefore the curse. Kat goes on to suggest that because of Ruby's acts of good, whatever cursed her has offered the woman as both punishment and a way in which for her to prevent these events from occurring. I think there's a really great reading of the story, and I completely subscribe to the idea of the woman being a manifestation of Ruby's fear of abandonment, especially because of how neatly it ties to what happens when anyone speaks to her. I don't think any of this stuff needs to be explicitly explained within the episode itself, but Kat's reading is pretty much what I'm working off. So we see Ruby on her deathbed, and get the image of the woman standing at the foot of the bed, getting closer and closer. Ruby reaches out her hands, accepting of both her death, but more importantly, embracing the figure that has been constantly by her side for the last 65 years. Finally, she might be able to see what she looks like, to touch her. In her final breaths, we see the faintest glimmer of a smile on Ruby's face. Then, from the woman's point of view, she's reaching out towards Ruby. Hard cut to the woman reaching out toward the TARDIS in the distance, 65 years ago. I've changed it to the woman reaching out rather than Ruby because I think it eliminates the confusion that the woman is Ruby herself, and it makes the abandonment reading clearer, while still being open to interpretation. The Doctor and Ruby have their conversation from the opening of the episode. Ruby says she's visited Wales 3 times and talks about the first 2. The Doctor name drops William, and Ruby spots the woman on the hill, who disappears between shots. Ruby stops the Doctor from breaking the fairy circle, they briefly talk about it, then the Doctor asks her about the 3rd time she visited Wales. Ruby pauses, thinking. She looks back at the hill where the woman was stood. Doctor, I remember. And you saw her again just now. Just for a second, yeah. Must be residual elements from that timeline bleeding into this one. It's like when you look into a bright light and you can still see it when you close your eyes. But none of that happened now, did it? That timeline's gone, right? Technically, yes, but you can still remember it. And a memory can be as powerful as anything. So what about Roger William? What happens to him? Oh, don't worry about him. He gets what's coming to him. In every timeline, apparently. Our Ruby Sunday gave him a piece of her mind. You both alright down there? Ruby and the Doctor turned to see the hiker standing about 50 yards away. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to check you were okay. The Doctor stands, approaching the hiker, squinting slightly. You must be frozen, my love. Ruby stands too, watching the Doctor. Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. I'm sure you're alright in that coat. To be honest, it's the only reason I spotted you. What a lovely colour. Who are you? Oh, sorry, sweetheart, don't mind me, nosy old thing. My husband always says I've seen you before. Who are you? Ruby joins the Doctor, now recognising her too. Well, I've been on these hills a few times over the years. No, I've seen you lots of times. Everywhere we go. Castarian 3, 60th London. There was a portrait of her in the Duchess's mansion. That's impossible. Who are you? I'm ever so sorry, I haven't the foggiest idea what you're talking about, my love. Perhaps I've just got one of those faces. I just feel sorry for whoever it is that's stuck looking like me. The Doctor narrows his eyes. Anyway, I better get on. I think the weather's turning. You two go and get yourselves out of the cold. The hiker walks off over the hills. The Doctor and Ruby watch on. How is that possible? Is she, following us? I don't know. But I think it's time we find out. Come on. They walk back into the TARDIS. A slow panning drone shot pulls out from the TARDIS, revealing more of that beautiful landscape. As the TARDIS dematerialises, snow begins to fall on the cliff tops. And that is the end of my version of 73 Yards, and the end of this part of the rewrite. Thank you as always for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please consider giving it a like and subscribing, and let me know what you think of some of these additions and cuts and tweaks in the comment section. Thank you generally for the support on the channel over the last year or so, and if you do like what I do and want to support me any further, you can donate to my Ko-fi here. Sorry that this one took so long, I've been really busy and the edit took an absolute age. I'm hoping that part 3 will be out in a more timely fashion. So stay tuned for that and lots more exciting stuff. But until then, cheers for watching, and hopefully I'll catch you again sometime.